In order to stick with the simplicity and just looking at the melted nuclear fuel of the accident, and there was an article that appeared in Wired magazine from the UK shortly after Fukushima happened about testing that has been done on corium. And because it's so dangerous, only very small amounts have ever been tested in a lab to see what corium does when it gets into the ground. This article, written by Eric Clemente, stated, "One of the things that I enjoy most is running across fascinating information when I'm not even looking for it. Case in point, today's subject. I was doing some research for my class on Fukushima Daiichi and Chernobyl when I ran into some references to lava. Lava, I thought, why are they talking about lava when I thought I was trying to find out about nuclear accidents? Lo and behold, what do I find but an entire research field that has been making man-made lava for decades. Sure, we've seen some of the recent man-made lava flows done at Syracuse and small-scale lava in experiments for some time, but here I was finding research that involved man-made lava, and moreover, this lava that has been made by an accident on a number of occasions with tragic consequences. Backing up for a bit, what I'm talking about here is the result of a meltdown in the core of a nuclear reactor. This is when the nuclear fission reaction occurring within a nuclear reactor is no longer cooled and contained sufficiently to prevent heating of the rods, the cases, the core containment vessel, and anything else nearby, including the concrete floor of the reactor building. When a meltdown begins to occur, as what happened in Chernobyl in '86 or Fukushima in 2011, the ability to cool the reactor is insufficient to keep the fuel rods cool, so heat begins to build and build rapidly. The two most important primary isotopes used in nuclear fission reactions are uranium-235 and plutonium-239. So the chain reaction of fission, decays, and absorption of the released alpha particles by other atoms is allowed to go unfettered. The heat continues to build to a point where the fuel rods will start to bend, and if heating is allowed to continue, melt, or in the case of Fukushima Reactor 3, cause a nuclear explosion. This is usually controlled by cooling water and control rods that absorb some of the neutrons created by fission and decay. However, if there's a problem, the heat can continue to rise and the fuel rods can become fully molten, which is the meltdown. So in a sense, the meltdown is in the nuclear reactor is the accidental production of lava. Now, this lava, of course, is very different than the lava that erupts from a volcano compositionally. The fuel pellets inside the fuel rods are almost entirely uranium oxide, while the fuel rods in which the pellets are made is made of zirconium alloys. As the fuel rods heat in an accident, they get hot enough to start bending around 700 degrees Celsius, and if the pellets inside the casings touch, they can begin to melt if the temperature reaches 1200 degrees. In the case of Fukushima, it was thousands and thousands of degrees hotter than that. In fact, at the height of the nuclear explosion from 3, there have been estimations that the material was actually heated to 30,000 degrees Celsius, which is why we have aerosolized plutonium that we are now dealing with. If you're going to design safer nuclear reactors, this is where you need to start getting your hands dirty, not literally, of course. How does this corium behave? And more importantly, what happens when overcomponents in a reactor come in contact with it? Researchers at the Argonne National Lab have created corium in the lab just in order to see that. You can check out some great videos of corium lava flowing on YouTube or crusting over when they pour water on it. The labs use upwards of 1 ton. And in fact, there's a picture of a scientist standing behind this hole that has been burned through a concrete wall, and the walls look about 3 feet thick, and there's just a hole burned right through it. And this is where we can use some help with math and dates. They found that corium lava can melt upwards of 30 centimeters of concrete in 1 hour. The NRC estimates were actually quite a bit lower than that, but this is what Argonne Lab had reported. This is why it is so important to know if a nuclear reactor accident has gone into true meltdown, as the corium lava will rapidly melt its way through the inner containment vessels or more in a matter of hours. When we come back, we're going to talk more about that and how we know the U.S. government knows where this corium is. You're listening to Wide Awake News.
The China Syndrome. It's about people who lie, and people faced with the agony of telling the truth.
Right.
People like Kimberly Wells, a television reporter paid to smile, not to think.
A few words about a veterinarian who makes house calls on sick fish. Or is it aquarium calls?
Richard Adams, a cameraman who never learned how to play by the rules.
Wait till you get in that other room, get that radiation all over that cute little body.
Jack Goodell, an engineer who knows too much to tell the truth.
In anything that man ever does, there's some element of risk, right? Well, that's why we have what we call defense in depth.
And cares too much to lie.
No accident.
It will start with a tremor in a nuclear power plant. Where it will end will depend on 3 people.
I would say you're probably lucky to be alive. The same for the rest of Southern California.
Jane Fonda.
Let's face it, you didn't get this job because of your investigative abilities.
Kimberly, don't fight it.
Jack Lemmon.
There was a vibration.
Michael Douglas.
I don't know that accident is the right word.
Accident is the right word.
The China Syndrome. The harder they try, the more resistance they meet.
They've got their own security man. Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you want me to make it any clearer?
The closer they get, the more threatening it becomes. The China Syndrome. Today, only a handful of people know what it really means. And they're scared.
Everybody keep your station! Everybody keep your station!
Soon, you will know. The China Syndrome.
That's a clip from the 1979 trailer of the China Syndrome movie, which I still haven't seen. I don't even think I need to because we're living it, baby. The 3 Mile Island accident was a slow, partial meltdown of the reactor core, and about 19,000 kilograms of material melted and relocated in about 2 minutes of time. A pool of corium formed at the bottom of the reactor vessel, but the reactor vessel in this case was not breached. Of course, tell that to the people that live in the surrounding communities and have yards full of mutations and all kinds of cancer and sickness in their family. That's from all the venting that was done while the fuel was being cooled. The mass that was found at the bottom of the 3 Mile Island reactor consisted of molten fuel and cladding. Some samples contained small amounts of metallic melt composed of silver and indium. Secondary phase composed of chromium oxide was found in some of the samples. Some metallic inclusions contained silver, suggesting high enough temperatures of volatilization of both cadmium and indium. Almost all metallic components, with the exception of silver, were fully oxidized, which is probably what some of the people breathed in the area. Corium is formed in 3 phases. The first phase lasts only several seconds, with temperatures that locally exceed 2,600 degrees Celsius. That's when the zirconium cladding starts melting and producing hydrogen, which can cause buildings to explode like we saw at Fukushima. The Chernobyl corium is composed of reactor uranium dioxide fuel, its cladding, molten concrete, and decomposed and molten other materials packed around the reactor and its thermal insulation. This molten corium settled into the bottom of the reactor shaft, forming a layer of graphite debris on its top, and 8 days after the meltdown, it had penetrated the lowest biological shield and spread on the reactor room floor, releasing large amounts of radionuclides. There were actually, in addition to 3 different types of lava, 5 different types of material: a black ceramic, a brown ceramic, a slag-like granulated corium mixture, pumice, and melted metal. And as only the Russians could do, in order to split off chunks of this corium for analysis, they shot at it with an AK-47. Now, of course, this elephant foot and all the corium that's left under the Chernobyl reactor has kind of turned to dust. It cracks. It has kind of like a glue-like hard consistency that has separated. There's different layers of these metals if you were able to cut right through it, like a cake, which of course you can't. And most articles on the Chernobyl accident indicate that this mass is now cooled to just above ambient temperature. But Michio Kaku had stated that there's still areas of it which is molten. Of course, we don't know because we can't look under there, just like we can't look under the Fukushima reactor buildings and see what's happening there also. 30 centimeters an hour, guys. It's unclear how long the ceramic form contains releases of radioactivity, and what they're really concerned about is because of the amount of discomposition from constant bombardment by neutrons and gamma rays and so forth, that these buildings eventually fall apart, which is also why they're trying to get the fuel out of Reactor 4 and the other reactors at Fukushima, because they know this can happen. It degrades concrete, it degrades metals. If you take something simple like cesium and combine it with water, you get cesium chloride, which is extremely corrosive to glass. And we're going to be talking about that soon and taping an interview with Loren Murray about material science and the effect that radiation has on our environment and our infrastructure, and that includes planes that are flying. So how do I know the U.S. can look under the plant? And I'd like to share an article that is a typical BS cover story released by NASA in August of 2010, which is just dripping with references to cool things like archaeological digs and past history, and how wonderful the technology that we have today can help us investigate our past. NASA Earth scientists advance space archaeology. 2 NASA Earth scientists have traded in their air-conditioned offices for the sweltering fields of central Turkey. Toiling 9 or more hours per day, 7 days a week, they walk up to 10 miles searching ancient Turkey archaeological grounds for bone fragments, pottery, and tombs. But they aren't using shovels, picks, and brushes to do the job. Instead, scientist Compton Tucker from NASA's Goddard Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, and Joe Nigro, who works at Goddard through Science Systems and Applications Incorporated, are combining NASA satellite data and ground-penetrating radar technology to map and protect areas of archaeological interest for an excavation project. Located at the famed spot where Alexander the Great cut fabled King Midas's Gordon Knot in the past, NASA radar has been used on satellites and spacecrafts to detect ice deposits and to explore deep canyons on the moon's surface. The radar assists in excavation by helping archaeologists identify areas where there are features under the ground, but GPR is also used as a non-invasive technique so that the site doesn't have to be excavated. Stay tuned, you'll see where this is going shortly. We'll be back listening to 508 News.